1029 KARN. First News, Kevin Miller, joined by Senator Tom Cotton. Good morning, sir. How are you doing today?
Hey, Kevin. It's good to be on with you.
Thank you for being here. Senator, a lot happening. You've talked about China. You talked about China with me, about how they didn't reveal the extent of the virus. They held on to PPE, and they pressured the World Health Organization. What have you been saying about this lately? What's the word there on that?
Well, there's no doubt that China has done all those things, and it's just consistent with their campaign of espionage and aggression against the United States going back decades. You know, we had one instance just hit home yesterday. You may have seen the news that a professor of electrical engineering at the University of Arkansas was arrested by the FBI on charges related to wire fraud. Now, what that really means is that he was defrauding the U.S. government because he was part of one of China's talent recruitment programs. Apparently, he was on Chinese Communist Party affiliated organizations' payroll for decades. So that means that almost every technology that they were conducting inside their laboratory at the University of Arkansas, things like semiconductors and hydrogen fuel cells for vehicles, other advanced technology is now available to Chinese Communist Party affiliated organizations as well. This is exactly the same kind of charge that a professor at Harvard faced back in January. Now, the real crime is that we don't make it a crime to work for the Chinese Communist Party in this fashion. That's why people get arrested for things like fraud on federal forms or wire fraud. That's got to change. So I'm going to introduce legislation that will make it clear that any researcher or scientist professor who participates in federally funded programs, which is essentially all of them, cannot also receive money from Chinese Communist Party affiliated organizations.
How do we know these are not just two bad people and not a bigger issue going on?
The FBI has been reporting for years on the Thousand Talents program and other Chinese talent recruitment programs, and about just how deeply it has penetrated America's institutions of higher learning and our most advanced laboratories as well. And if you look at the complaint filed against Simon Ong, the professor at University of Arkansas, you'll see that much of the sourcing comes from media reports inside of China in the Chinese language press. And that's in part because, the reason that can happen is that Chinese language skills are somewhat limited in our federal government's intelligence and law enforcement agencies. If you had someone combing through those every day, you'd probably realize just the extent to which we have professors or scientists who work in federally funded labs and universities who are also sharing all that technology with Chinese state-owned or affiliated or subsidized companies, all in a direct effort to compete against the United States economically and militarily.
Senator Tom Cotton on News Radio 1029 KARN. And Senator, I don't want to put words in your mouth, so correct me if I'm wrong on this. But you have talked with me about the World Health Organization, China pressuring them to not reveal information about the virus and how extensive it was. The word on that, the World Health Organization says that is just simply not true.
Well, the facts speak for themselves, Kevin. The World Health Organization was peddling Chinese propaganda and spin long after, for instance, it was abundantly clear that this virus was highly contagious, transmitting from person to person, not just animal to person. In fact, Taiwan had brought that to the World Health Organization's attention back in December. Of course, the WHO ignored Taiwan because they kowtowed to Beijing, which refuses to allow the World Health Organization to even accept an observer, not a voting member, but an observer from Taiwan at its assemblies and other conferences. So there's no question that the World Health Organization has been compromised by China from the very beginning of this pandemic.
Senator, we're talking about things on the national stage and the world stage, too, and they're important, yes. But what are you focused on that directly benefits Arkansas as far as it goes, not only with coronavirus, but maybe some other issues, too? What's your office working on there?
Well, unfortunately, there's not a lot that people are asking right now other than coronavirus-related impacts. We spend a lot of time every week working with small businesses and with families, with colleges and universities, with schools, with nonprofit organizations like churches, trying to help them navigate some of the legislation that Congress has already passed, designed to help them keep workers on payroll or keep the lights on or get through the worst of this peak. The Senate is in session this week, unlike the House, and we will be having a hearing later this morning with the top regulators of all of our banks, things like the FDIC or the comptroller of the currency and a few others, and that'll be, again, heavily focused on coronavirus and what these banking regulators are doing to make sure that our banks are not hamstrung by red tape, but are in fact able to get funds out the door that Congress has approved and quickly into the hands of those small businesses, the pizza shop owner, the dry cleaner, the hair salon or stylist, people who desperately need a little bit of cash to get through the worst of this crisis. Hopefully that's soon going to be behind us, and these businesses can begin to get back to something like normal, with normal workforces and close to normal demand, because all these businesses were strong and thriving just 3-4 months ago. So right now, pretty much all the work that we're doing is related in one way or another to the virus, not just its health effect, but its economic effects as well.
Right. What about concerns in the Senate as far as the spread of coronavirus?
The Senate is taking important steps, just like any workplace has to help prevent the spread of the virus. So, for instance, our votes are taking longer. People don't linger on the floor. We certainly don't talk in small huddles the way we once did. I keep my distance at all times when I'm around the Senate. If you look at our lunches, we've moved from a buffet-style lunch to box lunches, sandwiches. We sit further away in a bigger room. There's hand sanitizer and gloves and other equipment around at all times. So the Senate is taking a lot of steps, just like any workforce needs to try to minimize the risk of transmission of the virus. House is a little bit tougher in that regard because they have more than 4 times as many people as do we. But I expect they're going to get back to work either later this week or next week as well, taking some similar precautions.
Right.
But I tend to agree with what Senator McConnell has said. If we expect, our grocery workers and our meat packers and our doctors and our nurses and our truck drivers, all of whom are so vitally essential to the function of our society to be at work, I think we have to expect our lawmakers as well.
Well, it's interesting because the White House had the employees there that tested positive, and a memo went out to staff members yesterday saying to avoid coming in unless they absolutely needed to. Meanwhile, the president is saying we need to get back to work. Is it a mixed message?
Well, so we've done the same thing in my office. My employees have not been working in full force in the office for over 2 months. Fortunately, most of them can work on their computers and on their phones, working with the employees of other senators or committee employees to help advance our priorities for Arkansas. Some businesses aren't like that, though, obviously, whether it's a hospital or a grocery store or meat packers or what have you. So everyone has to try to take the precautions they can, and in those more at-risk workforces, we have to take the utmost care to try to introduce, new design in terms of office layouts or spacing between stations, plexiglass between checkers and customers, and so forth. We just have to take every step we can to try to get back to something like normal. But, the tests of those people at the White House are an important reminder. I mean, this virus is highly contagious, and no amount of testing, no amount of tracing contacts or isolating people is going to ever stop it from spreading, because it is so highly contagious. Even at the White House, even in Congress, people still have to go home, and they still have to go to the grocery store and eat. So no one is invulnerable from the transmission of this virus. We can take a lot of steps to minimize it. But in the end, until we get a treatment for the worst kinds of cases, and hopefully one day get a vaccine, we won't be able to go back entirely to the way things were before this virus reached our shores.
Senator Tom Cotton, good to have you on. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
We're a little bit behind. We're going to catch up. News Radio 102.9 KARN. Traffic now. Rebecca Davis.